No, it's fine.
Did you guys hear that?
Yeah, we all got it.
In progress. It's okay. It's happening. All right. So I just like to welcome Claris and Giuliano Iacobelli. Is that right? Iacobelli. Iacobelli. Is that right?
Iacobelli.
Iacobelli. Thank you so much, Giuliano, for coming tonight, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say in Claris Corner. So why don't you just take it away?
Sure. Happy to. So first of all, thanks for hosting us today. My name is Giuliano Iacobelli, as Doug just said. And I work with the product management team at Claris. Today I'm joined by Robert and Rosemary, which I'm sure you know. I'm pretty sure you know both of them pretty well. They're surely familiar with their faces. And we're here today to have those Claris Corner. It's going to be actually, this is the fourth time we do that. Is pretty much it started as an experiment. And we wanted that to become an opportunity to engage as frequently as we could with our audience of developers to share and what's going on, what we're working on, and stuff that we're experimenting with, and get either early feedback, a conversation, and pretty much an exchange of idea. Is anybody asking a question?
I don't think so. I think there are maybe
I think I've heard someone
have their mics turned off right now. People are welcome to speak up normally at our meetings, but if you're not speaking, it would be great if you just mute yourself.
Yeah, and in that regard, I absolutely welcome anyone to ask questions and interrupt me if if you have something you want to share or ask. I think we can collect most of the questions anyway through the chat, but still, please don't shy away from ask question, or if simply something doesn't sound clear or doesn't come off clear from my mouth because my Italian accent screw one word every three, so I recognize that, and please don't shy away from letting me know that. So I basically jumped into a little bit of the talk without sharing my screen. There is no much slide that I have to share. However, you should see my screen now. We went through this, so you know that this is Claris Corner number 4, work with product management team. And again, Claris Corner has been an opportunity for us to engage early and frequently with the developer audience. I recognize some familiar faces in the group, and some of you have been attending some of the past one that we've done. We've been at FM Berg, FM Disc. Last month, we did the Ann Arbor group. As Chris is here, Chris Moyer, which has been, they've been hosting. It was the last one, and we're glad to join this one today. And what we usually do is pretty simple. I go through a live demo or some of the stuff we've been doing, and after that, it's just open conversation. It's easy as that. So without further ado, I would just jump straight into that, with the only caveat and disclaimer I have to go through, that what I'm going to show is by no means an actual promise. I mean, it may or may not be raised at discretion of Claris, but it's just a way for us to anticipate what we are experimenting and working with. As I transition to the actual demo, if anybody has a question or anything, again, please do not hesitate to ask. If not, I will switch into demo mode. You should be able to see my browser, right? Let's see. Thumbs up. I see some thumbs up, so take it as a yes. Cool. Okay, let me give you some context what I'm about to show you. So this is basically some development effort in the direction of providing a way to address scenarios where you need to serve or interact with a solution that talks to an anonymous guest user specifically, and you specifically need to reach out to them through the web, right? So this is what we've been doing in that direction. So this environment that you're going to see here right now focuses on a specific use case, starting from a narrow scenario of data collection use case, but it's a kind of a first step to go to move further in the direction of providing an additional set of tools for you to tackle the development of native web application built on most recent technologies. I know for a fact that at least some of you are familiar with. So what I'm going to show you is a few interaction on how a web page that basically hosts a form to capture data for anonymous guest user can be created in this browser-based development environment. And again, we'll then open for some Q&A. So I'll take it from there. So this now, and obviously it's not a production environment, that it's a place that have access to it. I'm going to create what is now labeled as a new app. You can think it as a new solution, which is basically a web app that's going to be hosted on the web that will be designed to capture data. We're modeling this around the concept of a workflow, and I'll show you in a second what that means with that. It's basically a way for you to map a sequence of steps that a user would go through, or pages, if you want, that a user should go through when they need to kind of go through you can think of it almost as a user story, if you wish, but it's basically a way for you to capture these steps that a user is supposed to do through in this case, a registration scenario. Registration, just a boilerplate or base scaffolding that is generated when you initiate a new workflow in this environment right here. This is made of two steps. One is the actual registration form, and a second step that shows a confirmation page giving a user a feedback that the submission of data was successful. And in each one of them, of those steps or more, if we want, can be edited one by one. So I'll now start into the first one. I'll give this solution a name. I'm just gonna call it demo. It stands for Claris Corner demo. And I'm going to edit mode on the first step of that, which is the registration page. Again, this is kind of placeholder items so that the user doesn't start from a completely empty blank page, but it can give you a sense of how you can identify a variety of elements. There are some input fields pre-created. Some of them are just for typography or to add text, and there is a header. The idea, and what is probably one of the initial main changes from the development experience that most FileMaker developers might be used to, is that the modeling of the data happens as you working on the front end of the page in this case. So those fields are here, and they actually have underlying fields on a table, actually. And more can be created, and while we do it right directly on the front end, those changes are applied automatically to the data model which sits behind the information we're trying to capture. The page can be made by basically adding elements and building blocks to the page, most of them pre-made. This is currently the set that we have in this environment. And given that right now the primary focus is around data collection and data capturing, you see a lot of object that basically represents the most common data types that you can find in a form. Some data types are more kind of a primitive level, some other present some layer of abstraction and maybe are enriched by a predefined formatting or validation rules. I'll drop some on the canvas shortly. But again, you have a set of objects that you can just drag into this canvas and this page, and so you can start model your stuff. I'm going to get rid of a couple of them that I'm not going to read right away. So let's say I'm going to delete comments. Just going to keep email, and just add a few more. So the short text are those already represented here. Those, as you can argue, are elements for single line text capture. Something you might notice is that the page comes with a predefined grid right now, and can give you a preview and a sense of where the object is going to land and what is going to be the result of the addition of that element. So whether I move it here and basically add it to an existing row of that underlying grid, or I move it across and bring it down so that it goes full width, you get a good sense to how you can quickly build a page with your fields very quickly without having the other ones getting into the way as you add or move around more stuff. Each field and each field type comes with its own type of settings, whether that is ability to make it required as part of the collection, or the ability to customize some aspect of that, whether it's the label. So let's say this is address line 1, or a placeholder text for the user as a guidance. Here your address line, right? And I can start adding more. So this is the simplest one that you can think about, because it's just about text. Basically, you can have fields about actual numbers. So basically, they prevent that the data being inputted to be letters, basically just designed to capture numbers. And you can have formatting rules on this one as an example. There might be more about, commonly for my feature checkboxes, where you might have options that you can either rewrite here. So I don't know, let's see, red, green, blue, and then you want a fourth one that's going to be, let's see, purple. Again, this could be required. We can sort of change the sort of it or eliminate some of the options. And I'm going to add a few more just to give you a sense of how each multiple elements might look like. So I'm going to add a date field and maybe one about a phone number. And I'm going to regret this as soon as I go and try to submit some data, because I have added a lot of fields. But it gives you a sense of what we have here. And some other elements are not about data capturing, but additional stuff that might be needed in a form. So right now we have the ability to either have an header that can be customized as well. I'll get there shortly. Or you can add more text to create different sections and guide the user through some instructions there. Text fields, so text elements allows you to maybe choose a specific type of typography you want to be applied, whether that's a header or just a plain paragraph. And the header comes with a little bit more options, whether or not you want to have multiple lines, want to have just a big one or a small one, edit the edit there, change color as a background, or maybe use an image. Whether or not you want to floating or fixed at the top, fixed with the page or floating on top of it as you scroll. So those are some of the options. Now, as we start adding stuff, I can give you a preview of what's happening behind the scenes. So if I go to the data section of this app, you will see that the table I have is basically a reflection of a good chunk of the elements that I have added in here. It hasn't deleted yet those that I removed from the page, because there is a distinction between getting rid of an element from the UI and actually getting it rid from the data model. But everything else that I've added that wasn't there yet, obviously needs to be supported by the data model. So you can see that my the list of columns I have from the table from here moving forward, which is basically when I started adding new fields to the page, reflects the underlying structure. And what happens now is that if I want to see how this would pretty much, like, say, be surfaced or presented to a user, I can either use the preview mode, give me a sense, basically eliminate, and again, this is it's all work in progress, right? So this can give the developer a sense of how the page might look like once it's out there without the navigation bar. Obviously, if I go on publish mode, probably can give you an even better sense of that. We're still operating as a developer, so to speak. So this is not exactly as the end user would see that, because that button wouldn't be here. I'm still operating, in the context of an authoring environment, but this would allow a developer to get a sense of how the experience might feel like to the end user. And if I now start filling in some of those fields, let me do it real quick. And I'll go. There's no secrets. I can put the real one. And hit submit. What happens is basically I'm experiencing the form with the 2 steps that we had earlier. I'm going to go back to the second one to show them how that looked like, as if I was an end user. So I can move across pages from here. Those are the 2 pages that add up to the workflow I showed earlier. Let's say there was something here to be slightly different. I don't know. Image. Let me see if I have anything that I can upload super quickly in here. Should have it. As a placeholder, and if I go back to the publish mode, and let's say add another entry. So let's say Giuliano to let me try to, I'm going to do this on purpose. So to show that the fields that are designed to capture specific type of data doesn't just come up with formatting capabilities, but also actually validating that, at least from a syntax perspective, this is an actual email address. And this, and this, and hit submit. And now my second page obviously look different because it's what I just edited. If I go back into the data section, we'll see that the data has been captured. And as this grows up, we can imagine that you will want to have tools to either query the data or organize it differently. So we will. The data view is basically featuring ability to filter through records based on rules that you might establish, like is equal to or not, like email field is equal to something, whether or not you want to mesh one filter, well, any of a filter or all of them all together. So those are some of the actions I have. Obviously, this is one of the only comparison that you will be able to do so. And yeah, one thing I want to make sure that I reiterate: what you see here is not number one, set in stone by any means, and not even final. So I don't want you to be like concerned for something like, is this going to be the only comparison I'll be able to do with values when trying to filter a table? Because the answer is, in that case, is obviously no. Sorting would be another scenario, right? You want to be able to create sorting mechanisms, sorting criteria on your set of records here, and grouping would be about creating sections based again on specific rules. Right now we're just 2 records that wouldn't come up super quickly, and obviously, but I can come back to that. I want to make sure to also preserve enough time for the conversation. I can always come back to this environment even while we're doing the Q&A session. Now what? So this fancy and, but not so fancy yet, but this native web application able to capture data will be eventually hosted somewhere, and it's live, and we're capturing data for our end user. but all of view, and I would argue in many cases, this data is probably needs to leave and be integrated with existing apps, systems, or FileMaker solution that has been built so far. And what I'm going to show you now is how that data can actually be available with in a FileMaker solution. So let me get out of the browser. I'm going to get this minimized here. And now I'm going to start this app that you should be familiar with. And I'm going to just initiate a blank project. Oh, CC demo. Let me just start with an empty one. So the integration between that cloud as a system, I'm not able to do it from my local environment. So what I'm doing right now, I'm just simulating a cloud environment. So right now I'm running a Docker container, and I will connect to that from here. But ignoring that step, and assuming that this is a solution that is being used by either your customers or by yourself, you would be able to basically access data that is hosted on that tool and have it available as if it's actually living in your FileMaker solution. Now, this is a sample table. Again, this is running now in my local environment. So the reason why you don't see any matching name or field between what you see here and what I created here, it's just because those two environments are not actually talking to each other right now. So I'm simulating everything from a local environment, but it will be eventually it will be like from here you will be able to look up for the solution created in this cloud hosted environment and basically tap into the data that is relevant for your application. We'll be able to bring it in, have it available here as a connected table, and basically be able to work with the fields that are actually being sourced from that cloud native environment on that multi-tenant environment that is being designed on scalable technology, and be able to rely on that data from my FileMaker solution. And this, just to give you a sense, that again, the takeaway here should be predominantly that will be available everywhere on both directions. Right now, I'm showing you the ability to have that data pulled into a FileMaker solution. But the idea is that any developer will have a set of apps created across multiple environments and tools, and we want to, and I know that data should be available pretty much. I mean, everywhere is a strong statement. I recognize that, but at least across our properties, meaning Claris Corner, we want that experience to be almost seamless, right? You have your own data across multiple apps, and those data oftentimes needs to work together or act in concert if you have more than one solution deployed to a customer, or more than one that you're dealing it in general. And so we expect that to be able to be easy to do and similar. So ideally, you would have now those records will be pulled from the cloud environment, and you will be able to keep building or expanding your existing solution, counting that you have additional data by having extended maybe this solution with now a web form in this specific case that will be capturing data from the web. I think I've been speaking a lot. Hopefully there was managed to be decently clear, and I'll temporarily pause the screen sharing so I can see all the faces again a little bit better. I can pull that up again anytime if you want to. But yeah, I would open to any form of Q&A, feedback, or reaction.
Well, thanks for for sharing. I'd be curious about a couple things. I've been attending some of the previous rendition of this, and I keep seeing new stuff. I mean, not new stuff in how it was quote unquote branded before, but like there's new material that you're showing us today, and I appreciate that. I'm curious a bit of the window where the composition is happening. I see that you can pin the tools, and I'm assuming like a developer citizen who would be in the process of building his form would quite like some web builder type of thing. We often see a bunch of tools being docked on the left hand side, and people pick from it because like you always go to that set of tools. So I'm a bit curious about that workflow and how it's possible also to toggle in between different types. Let's say someone starts by putting something on the canvas and then says, well, I thought it would be a short text, but turns out it really needs to be a long text. Are there things that will let the user kind of shift on what his initial thoughts were and where he wants to go next, or is this something where it's more like, well, if it's not as you wanted, just like scratch it off, like when you took off everything from the canvas to start with, and then you started adding more. So what's the mindset there in terms of the experience?
Right, and again, it's a great point, and right now that type of ability is not is something that we haven't been focusing on, right? I think that the key question you're asking is that to what extent and flexibility I'll be able to change what I have there without actually having to strip away a field that I put in there and create a new one that replaces that type. So right now that is not there. It's a use case that we can see and acknowledge. How it's gonna actually be developed, that capability in terms of how the actual interaction will look like, I think it's early to say. Right now, it's going to be a good segue to make an additional comment that I want to make sure I capture as right now the average reaction or comments that I get either offline or during the session is that this looks super simple, and the answer is yes, it does. But it is by design. And it's not by design because this is what we mean to build as an end offering. We're not giving you a web form builder, even if this is kind of what you see now. But this is a way for us to build the foundation of a new stack based on a completely different technology that has the key foundational building block to build the basics of the interaction, to create UI while generating data model, having this data connected to your existing apps, and eventually grow it from there, right? If you've been here, if you've been assisting or watching previous, got lost in translation there. If you've been watching previous Claris Corners, you might recall that, let's say, maybe amount of data types available were less than that amount of options per the header. As an example, we barely had options on, I think, on the first Claris Corner I hosted in December. So as we figure out what we want to explore in terms of what it is, setup of configuration of a specific element on a page, or dealing with a replacement, or even getting eventually to a place where you can see what's quote unquote behind the scene, and have an escape hatch for that last 20% of customization where you want to be a little bit more hands-on. And to that regard, I just see that there is a question from Dan about, will there be a customizable CSS? I'm not going to answer to that with a yes or no, meaning that would be a how, right? The problem is that we know that in many cases, a more deep control on the look and feel of the app will be needed. So we don't expect to constrain you to that palette color you just saw there, or that set of styling with buttons or UI elements. Not at all. But before getting to, extreme customization, whether that happens by attaching or overriding CSS rule with your own CSS or any other way of implementing such feature, we need to have the foundation, tied all together. And we're really looking forward to the moment where we have this kind of first viable version of it, because that will allow us to iterate on this foundation much faster, which is already being observed, right, to some extent, in terms of elements that we'll be able to add or edit at a UI level. Right now, there's a lot of focus happening also on the backend side, but once this full stack end-to-end is being tightened up, we can probably move it toward in all those directions much faster. But I mean, sorry, long-winded way of saying, please don't be hung up on what you see now as if that's the solution we're building or trying to deliver to you, because that's to some extent the tip of the iceberg. That's a way for us to build something that can rely on the new tech stack. It's fully browser based. It's faster. It's more scalable. And again, it's a stepping stone for everything that follows.
Giuliano, would there be a more robust data architecture coming as well in terms of relationships or relationship graph?
Right. I was expecting that to. I mean, it's to come up as well, right? We're not expecting you to be able to manage everything into a single flat table. Not at all. But again, right now, to get started from a place, that would be the obvious starting point. We know that an actual solution that goes beyond inform that implies relationship with data, and there could be many aspects of that, right? Some use cases that we're looking into. It's even okay. I show you a demo based on the assumption that you have existing FileMaker solution, and oftentimes the data that you want to capture is dependent on some other data that is already living in your system. Let's say that a drop-down menu or that list of checkboxes isn't just a static list that comes from a list of options that is sitting in another source of truth that is maybe a FileMaker solution. Something like that should be able to happen, and that's goes even beyond just having two tables in relationship in that environment. We're talking about tying data across two very different environments. If you have the FileMaker solution hosted somewhere else or on-prem, as an example. So again, data everywhere is a strong statement, but it means that data should be accessible and be able to link to each together from different perspectives. Whether that happens in one single environment, let's say two or more tables that just live on that place that I just demoed, or it could be data that lives at the same time in two different places, but you still have to treat that as one, if you wish.
Are you planning on handling container data to, binary data in Mongo in Skateboard, or is that going to be a further evolution?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Chris.
So your demo is all text content. And so I was just asking if container field transferability between the two backends is going to be in your V1 release.
Yeah, I mean, if we expect people to be able to manage attachments, what usually are addressed or consider attachment in a form, the answer is absolutely yes. Whether or not that will be the porting of the behavior of containers in this new environment and how that will look like, that I wouldn't be able to give you an answer to that. But I think that the bottom line is, should this environment be able to deal with binary files or kind of a not just structured data, but stuff like media or images or documents like PDF, then the answer is obviously yes. And sorry, I've been talking a lot. Robert, feel free to jump at any time, and you can probably also add more color on some aspects. So
yeah, I'll happily jump in if you're wrong, but so far you've been good. Yeah, I don't have anything to add to what you said so far. If there's more detailed questions, I can happily jump into them though.
I gotta say, the demo is looking good. You guys have come a long way and just sort of smoothing things out just from the last one I saw. So kudos to you guys.
Appreciate that, and I'll share that with the team. One thing I will say around that is, the improvement sprint to sprint and being able to see, how we're able to incorporate feedback. I'm very excited to get that to be more broadly seen. I know that some of you that are attending these meetings have seen a bit of it, but it will be a very different experience than what we're used to in the past with FileMaker. And that was one of the things that Pete talked about at the keynote last year, when he talked about this release, being able to more rapidly work and update faster with this new stack. So I appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to more seeing that behavior.
I'm looking at the chat. There is another question. Actually, then first I answered only to one of the two questions you asked. One is offline web app mode. Answer there is it's a big I don't know. I'm not discounting its value, but in the grand scheme of things, there is a lot of stuff that we need to get stood up before being able to explore that further. And by the way, on many of those questions, let me pull that up. You should have it. I'm gonna drop it in the chat. I'm gonna drop my email address. So if you have any, oftentimes those questions come from maybe a use case you're exposed to or a need that you have. So if you're able to provide more detail or trying to understand the why behind it, that also gives us a lot of context. Usually that question are just the manifestation of a more structured or complex need behind it. I'd love to hear more, but long story short, on the offline support, I mean, if I have to think about the ratio of scenarios where that could be needed, it obviously will be a minority stay in everything else that might happen right now on the web.
Giuliano, there have been some use cases for that, and that is usually in the medical communities, where going into their environments, there's no Wi-Fi and stuff like that. And we've ended up having to service a number of those types of clients. I'm sure Dan has some other examples as well.
No, I totally get it. No, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I don't believe there is need for that out there. But when it comes to, unfortunately, ruthless prioritization in terms of what you need to get done earlier than rather than later, you also try to see how much that feature would impact a broad customer base and how important that is for that segment. So there's a lot of factors that go into those decisions. And again, I'm not telling you that we won't do it or that we'll do it in 10 years. I have no idea. But again, adding more context of what are the industries that might be more subject to that, in what scenario, what they're trying to solve. Because maybe ported like that, you might lead to think, okay, how can I port the entire web app experience offline? And maybe the reality, if we spend more time talking, is that you maybe just need a fraction of that really to be used offline, and everything else is not needed, because there might be opportunities to actually eventually to connect to internet again, right?
Yeah.
So if you have stuff you want to send across, please do.
I'll send you a few use cases.
And heads up, I might not if I don't reply like in 24 hours or so, and some of you in this group already know that, it's not personal, it's just that try to juggle with many balls.
Great, thank you.
I think Sam has a question about templates. Sure, again, the answer there is why not, right? But before being able, creating a template assumes that you have the need to build economy of scale in rolling out those forms, or doing that quickly, streamline the process. So before providing the tool to multiply productivity for something you do all this once, we need to make sure that you can do that thing once good, and then we take care about multiplying productivity there. And again, it could be a template of a page, of an entire solution, of configuration of a field. I don't know how fine-grained that might be or might look like. Generally speaking, templates always make sense when it comes to hit the ground running. To what extent and how has yet to be seen. But same as for Ben, if you have more context of your need to multiply productivity when it comes to stood up forms, we'd be happy to hear that.
Giuliano, sorry, I also have a question in terms of the general, I don't know if fit is the right word, but with the different products from the Claris family, because I'm thinking of a basic use case where someone would fill out the details that we have on screen, and then at the end of the workflow, we'd want to send them basically based on their email address, some form of confirmation, something that says, hey, thank you for giving us some information. Here is what we have on record, just so they have feedback, that it's not like they press submit and then nothing happens. And for me right now, it's a bit difficult to interpret where handshakes would happen, because I can easily think that on one end, we may want to say, okay, this is something where you do this and it's going to send an email. On another end, I can also just as well think that we would say, well, this is where you're going to fork into, say, Claris Connect, and then send that payload to something that will then hand it off to whatever emailing services you want to rely on. So is it possible to speak to where those boundaries type of thing stand?
Absolutely. And again, there are so many ways that a use case like that could be solved. Right now, the environment I've showed you as basically able to allow you to design a sequence of steps where each step is a web page and the user goes through that, period. If, let's say, you want to send an email upon submission, there are a variety of ways to do that. And the most obvious one might be there is an integration between this environment and Claris Connect that allows you to listen for new records created. And you can create a flow on Connect that says, whenever a new record is created on this form of this app of this new stuff thing, do something, and one of the steps will be send an email. Another option could be that instead of just being able to add pages in that workflows, you might be able to add something that is not a page, but maybe a form of action with a third-party system that maybe still relies on Connect infrastructure, but you're able to configure that straightly from there. So again, there is so many ways where something like that could be implemented, but I think the bottom line is not about sending an email, but about how do you extend the complexity of the logic of the stuff that you can build with this tool. And right now it's linear workflow, just web pages. Tomorrow will be multiple workflows that can support branching cycles, where, like, say, do while, and obvious, coding paradigm and construct that you're all familiar with. Integration with third-party systems, whether that happens, whether the configuration happens actually on Connect or not, doesn't really matter at this stage, but that's stuff that you're gonna need regardless if you need to go, whenever you need to go beyond this, again, simple first step of the form that I'm able to show today. But again, it's yet another opportunity for me to reiterate that this is a step of a much longer journey, where we hopefully gonna gain more and more momentum in terms of our ability to move fast on the roadmap. And that covers, complex logic, like we just said, Robert, or programmability, expanding it to scripting, right? And again, not promising it, but I know that Jeremy is close to. Is it still here? I've seen Jeremy for sure. Maybe he left. And then Jeremy is very close to JavaScript as an example. But imagine that that UI layer allows you to listen for events on at UI layer, and you can write and extend that behavior with JavaScript. That's the stuff that is basically most browser, well, actually all browsers are able to deal with, and it's the de facto standard to build web. So we could potentially allow developers to go that deep into customization of behavior. And it goes at all levels, whether it's just front end, being able to listen for events on the elements of the DOM through JavaScript, or extend the behavior on behind the scenes, and maybe add some piece of custom logic between two steps of that workflow with some, whether scripting or it's still JavaScript or it's Python or COBOL, I don't know. But again, the point is providing ability to expand and customize the logic and the behavior. And I know that most of the, usually a lion's share of the audience of those meetings are people that can go a long way with tools and coding. So when they see the form and that kind of reaction, that's it. Well, that's not going to move the needle for me. I get it. And we know that. We don't expect you to impress with a form builder, but we expect you to be able to relate to the incremental journey that we're trying to follow, and we need to have solid foundation to be able to move in that direction.
Giuliano, we are right now we've got Charles. He's like a stallion waiting at the gate. We cannot have that. He needs to be set free. But I want to ask you one final question. And it's for you, and it's for Rosemary, and it's for Robert. I'm wondering strategically, how does this fit in? How is this part of the bigger picture? Like, where is Claris taking us?
This is being recorded, right?
Yeah.
Trying to get me fired?
Oh, by the way, no, I want you to know, I'm asking in a friendly way. And I'm not joking when I say that everyone here is on Claris' side. I mean, we love what you're doing, and we want you to do. We just want to also understand.
I was just teasing.
I can say something.
Okay.
Which is not probably what you want to know, but it's stay tuned. We'll have more to say in the very near future.
But I guess that our mission stays the same, Doug. It's providing you the tool to be able to keep solving problem in environment where the surrounding technology is changing and change more and more frequently, whether that's the type of platform where you need to build for, whether it's the type of system you need to integrate with. It's pretty much like that. And this right now is going to filling a gap where we know that the platform doesn't shine when it comes to web. And so that's the first of many steps to either fill gaps or move forward to be able to work with the tools and solution that the market expect a developer to be able to work with. Hopefully this doesn't get me fired. It was vague enough to let me do my job.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And I think that everyone's had a lot to think about. And can we contact you after we've had a chance to process more of this and give you feedback?
Yeah, my email is in the chat, so feel free to use it. Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. At 7:53, Giuliano put his email address in the chat, so you can scroll up to that, find it, and think first, write second, and I'm sure that everyone at Claris will appreciate it. All right, thank you so much, Giuliano.
Thanks for having us once again. It was great.
All right, and now, the man who needs no introduction in this group, the inimitable Charles Delfs, is going to explain to us a little bit about ham without any pork.
Oh boy.
I'm
oh, boy.
correct. Ham-free pork.
And hopefully no Velveeta either.
Pork-free ham.
All right.
Not wrong.
So yeah. So let me jump to my screen here. And thanks. And I wasn't trying to like kick anybody forward or anything. I was late to the party here anyway. So I just want to talk about just some stories, and then we'll get into things a little bit deeper. As a FileMaker developer, you know, you have this different types of challenges, and I want to talk about authorization and privileges and all of that kind of stuff. And I want to introduce a different way of thinking about it than you probably normally think about this kind of stuff. Excuse me. So one of the stories, you know, your app has different users, and they're allowed to do different things, right? And that sounds pretty simple until it starts to get complicated. Right, it's really, really easy to code that into your apps, virtually any app at the beginning, and then the things that they're allowed to do starts to go sideways. Right, you need to give a single user or a group of users or different groups of users permission. Well, we can do that sort of natively, if you will, in FileMaker. We have third-party applications. That's external things that are bolting onto our system. And they have to follow that same set of permissions because we want this FileMaker to be the source of truth. Usually the source of truth sits close to our data. And then we also have a vertical app or some kind of a mechanism, and we need to maybe manage subscriptions. And if you think about a subscription is really a privilege set, right? I have a Dropbox. It has one of my privileges is I'm allowed to have, say, X amount of terabytes of data, and I can have so many documents that I can share and things like that. So those rights or privileges are all about the same thing. So just a quick bit of nomenclature here. I want to talk today about authorization, not authentication. So authentication is who we are. Authorization is what we're allowed to do. All right. And as Doug said, my name is Charles Delfs. I'm founder of FM Better Forms, Delfs Engineering. I have hobbies. I have kids. I have pets. That's about it for there. Let's get on to the good stuff. All right. No cheesy selfies or anything with me on vacation. So I want to talk about Headless Authorization Module, or we nickname HAM, and why, how this solves some problems. And I'm going to get into a little bit more deeper on those authorization things and where they can go really, really sideways with the conventional way people take the approaches or conventional approaches. So HAM is kind of a unique module. We try to make it as simple as possible. My kind of philosophy in coding and things is things hyper flexible, a little bit more advanced, maybe sometimes slightly higher learning curve, but the end result is you much further off down the road. It's unopinionated. That means we don't take a strong opinion like you have to have an administrator group and a this group and a that group. I don't care what the groups are. It shouldn't really matter, because then it makes the unit, whatever we're doing, flexible. Excuse me, I'm sorry if I got a bit of a cold here. It should be progressive, and progressive means that you can use a little of whatever it is or a lot. You think of FileMaker in general as kind of progressive. We can, jump in and we can make something as simple as a flat file database, and it just stores some pieces of information. Or we can start to get a little bit more advanced. We can use it a little bit more, and we can create a related table. And then a little bit more, we can add some scripting and some calculations. A little bit more, we can add some integrations and some third-party data sources or syncing or things like that. So it's progressive in the way that we use it. While HAM is very similar to that too. You can use it as literally as one line of code, or you can use it to run your whole system. It's vegan friendly in the sense of this is kind of tongue in cheek, but there's nothing added, right? There's no UI here. This is a concept that we're going to talk about mostly today. And it's really sustainable because it's future proof in the sense that the design of HAM is hyper flexible. So that means we're not going to come up with some kind of weird idea down the road and not be able to support it. So let's jump into some of those stories. And I just want to mention something quick. HAM is we call it a module, but really technically it's a concept, or it's a way about thinking about permissions. I want you to just kind of sort of do a little bit of open-minded thinking here. So, typical use case, we have something like a basic user, a manager, an administrator, so some kind of hierarchical thing, but not all users are hierarchical. For example, a test, somebody who's just testing, or a brand new person to the office. Maybe you don't want to give them a certain privilege set, but they need to have access to other pieces of data. So for example, I onboard somebody new in accounting. They may be able to not change certain pieces of information, but they have still a very high level of access. They can actually see payrolls and things like that. So there's kind of these weird blends of levels and things. So users have roles or permissions. And if we think about these basic users, we kind of expand those. So we started off basic user, a manager, and administrator. And if we think about this just a little bit here, and close that. So we think about a basic user, maybe they can't add users, they can't add new people, they cannot edit users, they can change their own information, and maybe they can do one widget, whatever that may be. And then you think of a manager. Typically, and that this isn't always, this is just in this particular example, a manager can do anything a basic user can, but they can also edit users, they can add users, and they can have 3 widgets. And then we have an administrator who can say, do anything a manager can do. So they're kind of inheriting all of these things that the other person can do. And they can do admin things, and they might have some exceptions, like a basic user can do something under a certain condition. So for example, maybe I am a manager or I'm a basic user and the manager's gone away, I get manager privileges. So, normally in FileMaker, we'd probably go and set the privilege set to manager and for the week, and then come back and turn it off again. Or maybe we just forget, or we get lazy because it's a pain, and then we just leave them that. And now my 1 or 2 employees have extra rights. So if we think about this data, and we start to represent this as, or we think about these sets of rules or privileges, and we start to represent them as data, I'm going to represent the same thing as JSON here. And excuse me. Sorry, I should have muted there. Okay, so if we represent this as JSON, you can see that I have basic user, and this basic user, I'm going to actually copy this. Let's just do this here. And Zoom's law is the bar is always in the way. So here's the same thing here. I think this is the same one. I'll just do this one here. So this way you can see it a little bit easier. So you can think of the basic user, and they have a set of privileges. Add user is false, edit user is false, edit their own details is true. I could probably change my first name or maybe my email, and I'm allowed maybe 1 widget. And I'm including this one in here so you understand you can think about quantities and things like that too, not just Boolean or truthiness type evaluations. Then we have somebody like a manager, and the manager, they can actually inherit. If you think about this, I'm just representing this as data right now. There's no code here. The manager is actually inherits a basic user, and you notice this is a square bracket, so that means it's an array. So maybe they can also inherit, some other user or some other role, we'll say, and we could probably represent all the different things that a manager can do. Maybe we want to compartmentalize the groups of roles or privileges. So it's fair to say that a manager, maybe they can inherit all the East Coast or all the West Coast, or they can inherit all the sales, but not the accounting, or something along those lines. Then they also have little overrides, because this edit users, if they're inheriting everything from here, this is false, so there would be false. But this is an override now, because that manager can override that lower set of privileges. So you can see how these can start to get fairly complex. An administrator can probably inherit everything the managers can do, and maybe they can do 1 or 2 more extra features. So let me just jump back. Oops, jump back to here. So that's how we're thinking about this as data, right? Does that make sense so far to everybody? I'm gonna pull up my thing here and see if how many eyes are glazing over. We good with that so far? That concept? All right, good, thank you. All right, so now let's see where we can take this. So if it's data, that means it can be really flexible, and we can parse through that data, right? And because the whole nature of data is it's soft, right? So let's take these set of privileges, and we want to effectively distill these privileges down into a single concise set of things that we can do tests against. Since it's a flat object, we want it, because this is big, deep object, and this thing kind of recurses. If you think of this as other languages, this would be like inheriting this class and going deeper into that object. And, if you're familiar with JavaScript to be like an object assign where we're taking the data and bringing it over here. This is almost the same idea. So if we flatten those privileges, we end up with just something like this. Add users false, edit users false, edit own details true, widgets allowed 1. Right? We take all of that depending on a specific person's role. Now, the reason we want to do this is it makes it really easy for us to test against. Various places throughout our app, we need to run a bunch of testing. So we have to maybe almost at the beginning of or the head of virtually every script that does anything important, we're going to have to run some kind of authorization test to verify. So we want this object really, really easy and testable. And you know, if it's a JSON object sitting like this, it's basically JSON get element add users. And if JSON get element add users, that will automatically evaluate to a truthy type thing. Then we can say continue on to the execution of the workflow or kick us out of that particular workflow. So that's kind of the idea now. So now we got all this concept of how we can build these really complex, deep inherited type and overwritten privileges purely represented as data. And we can represent them as data really, really easy now, right? We're not thinking about all the you know, when I was in school, we studied things called Carnot mapping. It's a type of Boolean algebra and mapping for truth tables and to distill big complex if-thens and calculation. Ands and ors and nots and distill all of that down into a simple equation. This is kind of doing the same thing. We're taking all of this. I don't really care about all the conditions. I can represent them as roles or users or as basic statements, and I can kind of distill it down to here. So let's take this object now and let's check the privileges. So HAM has a function. So basically what is HAM? So HAM is a set of 3 custom functions. That's it. 3 custom functions, and it's a concept again. It's not about a whole architecture and a whole bunch of UI and a bunch of extra cruft in there. It's just the custom functions and a way of thinking about things. So we have the functions are called, one of them is called ham configure, and that's something we'll talk about in a second. One of the main one is called ham check priv. And what checking privileges does is it basically checks can see accounting or any one of these privileges that we discussed over here. So it's basically getting that key and getting the result, but it's doing a little bit more than that. So this is kind of how we would use this in FileMaker. Now, if we wanted to, I mentioned the use case, a good authorization system has to be extensible into other environments, right? I'm using this in FileMaker, but maybe I have to have some kind of privileges in, say, Claris Connect, or I need to pass this distilled set of rights or privileges, this flattened object. I need to pass that into some other type of front end, maybe some kind of web front end, or it's another heavy iron system or something like that. So we can easily pass this off now. And then the developer in that system can easily check against this, right? They would probably have some kind of call coming into FileMaker that would grab this data. Now we can check going onward. Okay. So let's look at, I want to show you a demo. And basically how we use HAM. So it's pretty simple actually in terms of concept. And I'm going to jump over to here real quick, and we'll jump over to here. So the way we install it is pretty simple. There's 3 custom functions that get added to your solution, and because it's progressive, you can use it as much or as little as you want. You can invoke those functions whenever you want to do a test. We do need some type of generic truth table that's going to give us our basic set of what things or what people can do or what roles can do. So in here I have the same type of table that we had before, where we have a basic user, a manager. They can do different things, an admin. Then we need to, that's going to be a file. And I'm just going to open up something real quick here. I just want to make sure that, yeah, this is all good stuff. I can share this. All right. And we're going to blow this out because that just got destroyed. All right. And we're done there. Okay. Now, so a couple things here is here's a file, and this file is, typical FileMaker solution. And this is my preferences table. And I have this table here called HAM, and these are HAM groups. And these HAM groups have super admin, admin, and user, right? And you can see the admin group here is inheriting, or super admin is inheriting everything that the admin can do, and the admin is inheriting things from the user. Now, you may not want to inherit things, but the advantage of having the ability to do that, and that's not something we can easily do in FileMaker, the advantage of having that ability is now I can add one privilege at a very low level, right? We have some new thing here down here, and I can have different levels override that privilege. I don't have to go into every one of my different types of roles, if you will, and add that in, but I can if I want to. Okay, so that's the configuration. Then in order to configure that, we call a function in FileMaker. It's called ham config. And we basically, what that does is instantiate some global variables. And some people will say, well, you're using globals. And I heard they can be hackable and things like that. Ham is pretty flexible. It can encrypt all of that data. So it's sitting in a global as an encrypted blob as well. So we keep it pretty safe that way. And then when I go to use it, just like we saw earlier on, I'd say ham check priv, right? So that's the core concept. Now let's think about where we can go with this. And I'm just going to zoom out here really quick. And this is an example here. And this one's a little bit bigger. This is an example where we're using it with better forms, but it's the same type of an idea. We're basically grabbing our ham group, we grab our ham user, and we grab any overrides. Now remember, because of the concept of inheritance, we can override different things. So if you think about a typical business organization, and we have in a typical business, we have, or even a solution, we have maybe users, you have maybe organizations. So maybe there's companies, accounts, something like that. We'll call them orgs within your file. We have users, we have orgs, we maybe have different types of users. Maybe there's the internal staff, and then there's maybe some external people who use the system too, or something like that. Every one of those people can have overrides that we can easily match in. So that means I can go up to a very specific person, say Jennifer or whatever, and I can give that person a set of privileges or even a single privilege very, very easily, right? Just by adding that in. So I'm going to jump over to this application here. And this is just a web app. And this web app is actually talking to FileMaker. And what this is doing is it's under the hood, it's grabbing an object. And FileMaker is generating it. I'm just going to show you what that looks like in just a second here. You can see this right here. So FileMaker is generating this object, and it's passing it into an external third-party application, right? That application is taking that, and it's got this little ham object right here, and it can easily, anywhere in the app, do tests against that. So my user can do data entry, can generate survey that's specific to this app, can manage users, can see all users. And if I jump over to here, I'm going to pause my screen just for a quick sec, just in case I accidentally expose something. I don't think I will. I don't think there's a problem, but just in case. Yeah, all right. And give me a quick second, almost done. There we go. Okay, so I jumped over to a user table here in FileMaker. So everybody has FileMaker solutions. We probably have some type of user table. You may be managing users through FileMaker's users as well, but there's a good chance that you have an equivalent user table because you want to augment that user with extra information, right? Maybe their contact, their phone, or whatever. For logging, things like that. So I have a user here, one of our team. I think he's on our call today too. Jason, this is his account. And right here, we can see these are the ham groups that Jason, this user, which I'm logged in over here with, has. Jason has admin account, right? If we wanted to give Jason super admin account, we could do that as well. Now, in this particular application, if we look over here, Jason can only see the stuff for this particular company, but the super admin can log into this app and they can see for multiple companies, right? So how do we give that super admin special privileges that when they log in, they're just like a user, but they can do extra things? So it's pretty simple. So we basically just edit this. First, I'll make him a regular user. And just for reference here, A regular user cannot, in this particular app, cannot invite other users. So I'm going to go over to this accounts page here, actually, and it's already there. So as a regular user, he can't invite extra users. And let's go back, and we're making this, was it, I think it was super admin. Super admin. Hopefully I'm in the right file here too. That always helps. All right. And let me just do this. Oops. All right. And I'm not sure if there's any extra companies. I'm just going to have a quick look here. And now you can see that this same user, I made them a super admin. They can jump to other organizations, and they have basically different rights and privileges. Now they can add users, right? And they can generate a survey, and they can do other things. Now, this is not just a bit of UI sugar in the sense that we're just hiding that privilege on the front end. FileMaker is actually hiding the privilege in the back end as well. So if we go over to one of these scripts in here, and let me give me a quick sec here. I'm just going to close a couple things that were left open in typical fashion. And I'm going to jump to, let me find something that would, where we could see something like that. Let's jump to something like here. So here's a script. And this is a script. You can ignore all the other stuff that's happening in here, but this is a script that's called invite new user. And we have tons of scripts like this in our solutions. So in order for us to invite a new user, I need to test, does the person who's using this at the moment, are they allowed to invite new users or manage users? So here we have basically, this is, I don't know if you guys use this as a design paradigm, but it's called a single loop error trap, or a single loop exit condition. So basically I have a loop at the top, there's a loop at the bottom. I'm always exiting the loop with true. So it's always going to, it only runs one time. And now what I can do is, instead of having a whole bunch of nested if statements for all kinds of complex logic, I can have the ability of kicking out of anywhere in this script. So this kind of a, you can do some research independently on that. But basically I exit the loop, and this is doing a couple other little things, but I basically exit the loop really simply if my ham check, that run that custom function, ham check priv, and then whatever the privilege set is. So it makes it really, really easy to use. I'm going to show you a couple other things you can do with this module as well. And let's jump over to a few here. All right, so here's some really cool things. I think they're pretty awesome. First of all, ham is designed for FileMaker first, and FileMaker is a source of logic, right? It doesn't have any UI, and most of the time you don't need to put a UI on it. It kind of, honestly, it goes against the principle of how it works. The idea is that you keep things really, really simple, and it's easy to implement. So it's literally one function that is called typically when the user logs in or you change users. So whenever the role would potentially change, that invokes some global variables. Those global variables manage ham, and then the custom functions check against that. There's only 3 custom functions. The functions are fairly complex, so we won't get into the operation of them. But if you're interested in knowing how to write custom functions with multiple commands in those functions, you can sort of take them apart from a learning example. That's a whole other thing. It can securely encrypt the global variables that it does use, so it keeps things safe. If you so need to that, if you're worried about somebody hacking your FileMaker solution and somehow managing to turn on the development tools or the data viewer or whatever. And ham can do a couple other really cool things too. Typically, when you get into complex sets of privileges, and I'm going to use companies that have, say, software as a service. I know a number of FileMaker users who have used FileMaker, and they sell different types of subscriptions and things like that for their application that they've built. And one of the things you often see is add-on packs, right? An add-on pack. So like Dropbox, and maybe I can buy an extra 5 terabytes or something like that of data, or I can buy an extra 3 widgets, or I can buy so many API calls or something like that. And then I want to buy maybe 2 add-on packs. Or maybe I want to, as a marketer, I want to create a new Christmas bundle that has 3 widgets of X and 3 Y widgets and 2 X, Y widgets, and put those all into some package and sell them to the user, right? Well, how do you manage to code that everywhere in your app? It's virtually impossible. Because you never know where that stuff is going to be used, and you never know the combinations of the stuff that the user has. So one of the ways you can do that is we have these types of calculations that you can embed into HAM, and one of them is called eval, and one of them is called sum. So I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to jump over to this. There we go. And imagine we have this as our truth table, and it says widgets allowed is 1. And maybe what I wanted to do is I wanted to say on Tuesdays, right, the second day of the week, I want to allow a bonus, like a happy hour for widgets. I want to allow the user can do 2, whatever the widget is, instead of 1, or something like that. So we can do something called eval like this, and we just concatenate onto the end an underscore eval. And what that does is, what HAM does is it takes whatever you pass into here, and it evaluates it as a FileMaker calculation expression. So you could say something like, and I forget the command, but it's something like, what is it, day of week? Is that what it is? Day of week, get day of week, maybe something like that. Help me out if you know, Jason.
Yeah, it's day of week. It's just day of week with the date in brackets. So you want day of week and then
okay.
So
it would be like that'd be something like get current date.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So it'd be something like get. Oops. You get the idea of week. There we go. We'll build from the outside in. Get, and then current date. It's probably a capital C. All right. So, and then we would say if that equals like 2, right? So I think that's, I don't know, maybe that's Wednesday or Tuesday. I'm not sure, Monday or Tuesday, but you do something like that. Now that would evaluate to truthy when it's a Tuesday. I think if the day of the week starts on a Monday, or maybe it's a Sunday, I'm not sure, but you get the idea. So now this is an incredibly complex thing to do, right? And what HAM does is it takes this and it calculates it all out, and then it'll return over down here. It'll return a certain number. Actually, this one's a widgets allowed. So this is a number, it's expecting a number. So I would do something more like if day of the week equals 2, then the answer would be 4. Otherwise, I'm going to write kind of a shortcut here. Otherwise, it might be 1, something like that, right? So we would do some kind of an if statement on this for this particular one. All right, does that sort of make sense so far? So the idea is that you can pass calculations in a JSON structure, and it gets evaluated recursively. Have I lost you? You with me? Okay, I'll take it as you are. So let's do something else. We could say
nice.
If.
Thanks.
Pardon me?
It is nice. Thanks.
All right. So those are the types of things that you can do there, basically passing these dynamic calculations. Now, other areas where you'd want to do this is something like this. You could do something like this. You could say sum, and my widgets allowed is maybe for a basic user, I have 1 widget allowed. But if my widget allowed, if I do this here, sum, and I put 2, that would mean the manager would automatically get 3 widgets. Okay, so now you can see why we invented this. We use it for subscriptions, right? That's what we do. We take HAM and sort of in a way turn it sideways. But it's really designed for these kinds of really complex things. So whenever you want to be able to have something that has a total number of volume usage, and you have multiple tiers and you need to add those together. Maybe this person has a travel allowance, and the travel allowance is $10 a week here, but here it's $20 a week. And you want to summarize those two, because if they're a member of this group, maybe I want to give them a little bonus. So now they got $30 for this travel allowance. And that's it. This is as far or as hard as it is to configure or to think about. Now, again, very, very simple. It's a concept, right? It's the concept of it's a JSON object and it's recursive. So that means things can reference other things, and it can go as deep as you want or as shallow as you want. And you have no opinion as to the configuration, right? That is sort of in a nutshell what ham is. Now, to get started, it's pretty simple. We have a GitHub page here that has a downloadable. Let me see if I can find that downloadable. Let me just pause my screen for a quick sec and open. Just give me a quick second. And it's a simple, like a playground that you can explore and understand it a little bit more. And I'm just pulling it up here.
Charles, have you had a bad experience showing your credentials? Wow.
No, but I just don't want to take any chances. I got too much stuff.
Smart, super smart.
Right. It's become habit now, and it's really, Zoom is great. Hit pause, and it just freezes. And it's not even so much credentials. And it's not that I don't trust anybody here, but then there could be attack vectors, there could be keywords and things like that. And for the most part, there isn't, because I'm only demoing dev systems. And I'm not paranoid that way, but why not, right? So here is the ham demo file here. And let me just minimize this so it's not so much noise in the background. Okay, so basically to use it is there's instructions here, and it's using the same example that I just mentioned here. We talk about how to call it, ham check privilege, and then how to configure it, and then how to do things like evaluations. Here's get day of week. So it looks like this one's here. I don't know, maybe this is wrong then, but at any rate, and extra configuration objects. You can do things like we've tried to incorporate virtually everything. We wrote this about 2.5 years ago. One of our team and myself, we architected it. And in all honesty, we haven't had to make any changes because I think we pretty much got the main use cases. But one of the things that came up was what happens when you have a FileMaker user that logs in on Monday and they just walk away from their computer. But you have some temporal type condition that they're not allowed to run payroll on, they're only allowed to run payroll on Friday. So you need to constantly evaluate that, but they've only logged in. So that evaluation can be computationally really expensive if it has to, since it's a FileMaker calc engine, it can reference any piece of data in FileMaker, right? Because you can use execute SQL within that and do anything you want, as complex as you want. So you can potentially have something that's very computationally expensive. So what we've done is there's an option, it's a Boolean option that's called evaluate now, and that will not evaluate until you actually request check the privilege. Otherwise, we generate it ahead of time, just for an efficiency aspect. You can store the global. You can store the global outside the system, so you don't have to store it the way ham stores it. You can add an encryption key in there as well. And let's go over to here. So let's have a look at the demo. Here's the demo here. You can play around here and you can generate your different user sets or different roles, these types of things, basic and manager. Here's 3 different people here. And I select Joe Blob as the active user now, and we can select what role they have. So if I want Joe Bob to have, let's see, I don't know. Let's see, is that a FileMaker thing? Let's see. Looks like there might be a little glitch in here, but that's okay. So I have Charles here. He's an admin, and maybe he doesn't have any overrides. So there's no overrides for Charles. So he's an admin. So in theory, this should be Charles's set of privileges. So when we run the ham setup, that's the configuration. These are the privileges that get distilled from here. Okay. So you can see that add users is true. So 1, inherit manager. So he grabs all the manager stuff. Down here, and then the manager also inherits the basic user. So over here, so I have all of these things. Now I can check any of these privileges. So let's say I want to check a privilege like add user. This isn't really super exciting, but invalid privilege name, is it add? Let me see, add users. Okay, so ham does a lot of debugging as well. So if you reference a bad username like I did, it's actually add users, it'll tell you. So let's do add users, and let's try that again. And you can see the result is 1, right? So this is just wrapping those custom functions. This is not a user interface that's designed for editing or anything like that. It's for experimenting and understanding how ham works. There's another one I didn't mention, it's _max. So if you want to give the max of any of the privileges, maybe the max number of login attempts that a user is allowed to do. And since I'm inheriting a basic user, I want to be able to try a few more times because I'm a higher level. I can add up, or I can take the highest number out of any of the groups that it recursively looks at as well. So that's the concept. We go to Eric and we were to check Eric for the manager, and he is not allowed to add users right there. So that's how we would use that. You can also inspect over in here. Let's see, and you can see a few things. HAM does leave some globals, and the globals help you to debug any problems. Like you can see a last error here. You can see the HAM configuration object. That's the original one that's over there, and you can also see this is the flattened object. So this is the one that you primarily do your testing on. Keep this flat like this. And the main reason for that is that way it works in every other system as well, right? You have to think about your future of your app. And the check priv result, that's the last result there. So that's the gist of HAM and why I think it's exceptionally useful. My advice is to download this demo file, play around with it, and understand the core concept. It may look like there's lots of settings and things like that. There really isn't. It comes down to having this as a global field, some in your preferences table. And if we look at any of these users, this particular user has, must barbecue. So this actually interests me. Eric has an override of must barbecue. So if we were to probably test this out here, let's see. Yeah, so he's got true for must barbecue, even though it doesn't exist in here. We gave him an extra privilege. See, that's kind of the flexibility. But download the file, check it out. HAM super. Here's another bit of integration. It's super well tested. So we have an entire test suite that automatically runs. So if you ever have to make any suggestions or changes, you can run it against that, and it tests all the different variations. So it's very, very secure. So we have a lot of confidence in it. All right. Any questions so far?
There's a question in the chat about the file and needing username and password.
I think it's in the docs. So I think it's admin. You can check the, let me just double check the docs real quick.
It is admin. Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah, there it is right there. Yeah. So. If you don't already, a couple of things I just want to mention quick, and this is kind of more of a public service announcement. We don't have a great way of sharing stuff in FileMaker. I think we know that. GitHub is kind of the closest thing that we got that's slightly better than Dropbox from FileMaker's perspective. It's amazing for code, but the code is usually text-based, and that's where it shines. It doesn't shine well with binaries, and that's what a FileMaker file is. But it does do a great job of managing things like issues and that type of stuff. So, so if you don't already use GitHub, it's free account. Get your own GitHub and play around with it to understand that world. The world is sort of open source, because what it'll allow you to do is when you're starting to look and starting to debug things, you can see what other people ran into. And especially if you're using some type of module that has its source code in GitHub, if I'm looking for something, I can go into the issues and I can read the issues, and I can get really, really good at that. And that will make you 10 times the developer in terms of debugging and using your resources. You think your Google foo is good now, get your GitHub issue search foo going on too, because that's really, really useful. All right. Any other questions, guys, about that? Can you see that okay?
Charles, can I just interject for a moment? Just for the possible gotcha. Just to let everybody know, if you use the HAM utility function to, because there are different layers of overrides, just to let you know, you can roll together 2 layers at a time, and order matters because the later ones will supersede the previous ones. So put your most permissive set at the end.
let me give you an example here. I'm just going to pull up something really quick. And just a sec there. I just want to make sure Charles Delfs, just so you're going to hide some things here. Okay. So I'll show you kind of under the hood how we use HAM a little bit. I have Charles Delfs Company, and this is just some under the hood stuff. And Charles Delfs Company has a subscription, and the subscription is called Test Drive. And oops. And that test drive has certain privileges, right? So let's go into plans, because that's where we keep those things. And I'm going to search for test drive. And there we go. So here is my test drive plan. This is just a scratch built layout. It hasn't been changed in like literally 5.5 years, but it serves its purpose. And here are the attributes for a person who's using test drive in this particular system. They have an app user limit of 1 user. They can have 1 domain. They can have certain environments. Is payment gateway allowed? No. And server limit, they can only connect to 1 server. It's very limited plan, right? And Charles comes up to me and he says, well, you know what? I'm going to be giving a demo at SOFA next week. And if we were to look at his company here, this is his flat object. These are the rights that Charles company here, the pseudo company, has. He has all of these settings. But I want to give him, oops, I already did this before here. I want to give Charles some extra stuff for his demo next week. But I don't want to change the test drive plan, because that could change it for 100 other users, right? So I need to override just him. And this is what Lindsay was talking about. You can add overrides at different levels. I can add it at the organization level, which is here. I can also just take one of the users, which is me in this case, and I can just give that user the extra privilege, right? So I can do it at any level here. So right now, my forms limit, let's say this thing here, that's how many pages I can make in this app, is set to 2. But I want to change that. I want to give Charles some extra stuff. So I want to make it 20 and get rid of that trailing comma, and I update that. And now you see only this person or this organization has that extra privilege. The rest of the organizations, all the other privileges and everything else that I create in the future will still percolate up or bubble up. But unless I have this one particular override set in there, I have an extra privilege for just for them. And that's super useful, because if you have some kind of system where tenants in some fashion need to get special privileges, special overrides. Now, these privileges don't have to be Boolean. They can be numbers, they can be percentage, they can be strings, they can be anything that you want. And now I give an extra string or, whatever it is, to a certain person at any level. So that's what Lindsay was referring to there. And the same thing for people. Let me just make sure here before I flash people's names. Just give me a quick sec. Yeah, just. Okay. So here's a bunch of people here. And for Charles, actually, I don't think we've exposed this in here, but normally you could, if I had a HAM object at the user level, we don't have one in our system, but we could easily add just Charles and he would get some special privilege and be privileged. So there you go. So that's the gist. How do you guys do your privileges now? Like, how are you rolling out these complex things and maintaining them?
I use HAM.
Yeah. And how have you found that? That's
awesome.
Robert's going to tell us all about that next month.
So this is a cool
Charles,
thing.
if you're interested, Charles, yeah, if you're interested, I'm going to use HAM because I have an app in a complex where I work in-house. There's a lot of individual privileges which I always have to set just for some people, and I set up a little table, and I just put in the usernames in a text as a delimited list, and then I made a little custom function, and so the script runs and it's just an SQL call, and I have a look and see can they do this, and I put that in the head of the script, and it's all done by numbers. So it's kind of nice. It's very easy to deal with, and I can just look at that table. I can add or remove somebody
for simple things, right?
But
it's, the whole idea is, where do you go when you have to inherit, and where do you go when you have to create calculations? Do you go in
Yeah.
50 scripts in your system and add a calculation? Or do you change it in one custom function even? Or do you just change it in data, which is what we do?
Yeah, I mean, the only place I need to change it is in that table. I can just add and remove users there. But it's very simplistic, and yours is much more sophisticated. So I'm going to change to using ham. Thank you.
It's really, really simple, right? Here are the 3 custom functions. That's it, right? This is ham configure, and you can look at the code and if you want, right? It's, you know, obviously, it's very well documented, I think, or fairly well documented. And that's the first one, which is ham configure. That's the one that builds a configuration object. You can see how the encryption works and all of that stuff if you need to. Ham check privilege. This is the one that checks the privilege. And there's some conditionals in here that check for different settings and how to handle errors just in case certain values are not configured properly. Ham always fails in a safe way. So we fail to solve falsy or 0. So if you keep that in mind, if there's some problem with your system or you add a new workflow, that that it'll end up failing to a safe mode if you didn't include that into your users. And then finally, the other one is just a utility custom function. And this just helps. We have certain pieces of code that both custom functions need. So this is just an extra one that has a bunch of different, a bunch of different things. It does stuff like object assigning or object merging of JSON objects and the recursion and things like that. So that's the gist of it. Very, very simple. It's not a complicated thing. So if you're thinking, oh, I don't know, I don't have to learn this. No, you don't. You have to understand that there's going to be an object, or actually it's over here. You have to understand that there's going to be some generic object, and it can be as simple as just one little tiny thing here. And then you're going to configure that with one custom function, one time when the user logs in, and then you do all your tests in the rest of your system. It is that easier to do. And not to spoil.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Not to spoil some of Robert's things, but he's actually used it in some different ways. And again, when you make something super flexible, people start to come up with very creative ways of doing stuff. User privileges, we've seen people use it for, right? So my default color is my default point size. That's a privilege, right? My default point size is 14, but a certain user might want to increase the point size for something. So now they have it 18 points bigger. And that's really a privilege, right? That's really a setting that gets overridden over the basics, but all the other stuff, font bold or color, whatever it is, all stays back to the original base that we have.
This will be a lifesaver for me. I already started to get the very basic JSON part, and now I see it's all done. So I'll go to the Bahamas using the time I saved.
Yeah, you can. I'll implement it for you, and you can take me to the Bahamas. All right, I think it's fair.
Whatever. Yeah. Good idea. I'm already retired, so once you retire, I'll take you to.
Well, I can retire if you pay me enough. So.
Yeah, if I get paid, yeah. But thank you very much. This is very nice.
Right. I hope you find it useful.
I already know I will.
In general, it's different, but if you like anything, this types of stuff that we build, you'll love this, because I think personally, as a small chunk of code, it's one of the best things that we've ever done. Right? It's pretty unique in the concept of how it works, and it's super flexible. So give it a go.
It is. I actually did something for multiple languages, but that's years ago, and nobody was interested. So
that's interesting, because you could do that actually, because the keys could all be the language. Key could be the language, the user role, and it defaults say to English or whatever language you want, and then you can augment certain keys, and the keys that are augmented, you inherit say German from English, and just the words that you put in German will show up, and all the other ones will be in English.
Actually, it was way more than just the words. It included certain dictionaries.
Yeah, but I'm saying conceptually. I'm just trying to demonstrate conceptually that you could do something like that.
Yeah.
So.
But it was a long time ago, and since no interest was shown, I just dumped it for now.
Right.
Anyway, this is wonderful. Thank you.
All right, well, that's it for me. Thanks, guys. If you have any other questions, by all means, please join us. And we have a Slack channel and things like that. But feel free to email me. My email information is on the GitHub repo as well.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you. Good to see you again or hear you again.
Charles,
Thanks, Charles. That was great.
All right, awesome. Thank you, guys.
Amazing.
It's sort of the group's version of applause. Hard to do over Zoom. Charles, what's your estimate of implementing something like this?
Sure, let's do it. So we can emulate it, what it would be. So it's going to layout mode. I'm assuming that this is making some assumptions. Your system already has a preference table. You already have a mechanism of finding those preferences, right? So a preference table is usually a one record type thing. In most systems, it could be multiple, I guess, if you have different types of prefs. And you already have a mechanism of how you get that preference, right? We use a custom function or execute SQL usually to fetch the privilege in that. So there is going into your layout mode, creating the ham empty object, the field where it's going to go, and drawing this thing here out. Start with something like that's already working like this. You don't need these inheritances. You can get rid of that if you don't want it, and you can keep just some different levels, right? Keep it super simple. And you have this, you paste that into that preferences field. Okay, so that's the first thing. You paste 3 custom functions into manage custom database. Manage custom database. Manage, what is it called? Manage custom functions, right? So copy these, paste them in. That's the second thing. Then somewhere, and this is making the second assumption, is that somewhere in your system you have some kind of user environmentally set up thing that when you on first window open, when the first file first opens, some kind of script like that, that whenever a user some systems allow people to log out, like a soft logout, they kind of log out and they go to a lockdown screen, but it's really, it's another user logged in, like a temporary user. So anywhere in your system where you can change the user role, you would add one function, one line of code that says ham. It's this guy here. It's basically ham setup, and you're going to pass it the reference to this, and you're going to pass it this user's roles that they belong to. So Eric here is belonging to the manager role, but he could belong to maybe manager plus admin. So that's it. That's the thing. So maybe make 2 or 3 lines of code, and then wherever you need to check the privileges, typically at the head of most important scripts, you add a check, and that says if ham check priv, check the priv, and you're done. So I don't know, maybe 15 minutes with learning curve.
No, plus learning curve.
No, with learning curve. You just listen. You were listening, right? You're paying attention.
It's no kidding, Doug. It's really quick. It's really quick. I mean, it takes longer for you to craft the actual JSON and say, here are the authorization objects I want to like implement controls for, than to actually roll it out. You know, it's really just you got those 3 custom function. You deploy that in, and as soon as you fed the data into the module works for you. So it's and Charles said, you know, you can use it as little as you want or as much as you want. So it doesn't mean that you have to on day one change all of your existing calls if you have some other things in the system that implement some form of controls.
You have to work out the implications and look at the unintended consequences.
Well, that's the beauty of it. Your system is already where it is. If anything, you're adding some restriction to it. That's it. There's a really small footprint. There's literally one field, Like, I don't like this stuff that you got to import a whole crap ton of layouts and drag stuff on, and it's got all kinds of hooks all into my system. And then I realize I don't want to use it. Right. And then it's really hard to back out. You know, it feels really cool that I've implemented this big, amazing thing, but it also had 15 layouts and a zillion scripts and all kinds of stuff. 0 scripts, just 3 custom functions. Because remember, this is not about an opinion of UI. It's an opinion of data and how we can think of privileges as data. That's really what it's doing.
And Doug, it also depends on where you're starting from. So if you have an existing solution where your scripts are testing, say, against stuff like get account name and stuff like get user privilege set name, you know, then getting yourself out of that, like there's nothing that's going to wave a magic wand and say, hey, all your calls are changed and here you go. So that's stuff that you yourself have to go in and do. But if you have something where you're already in the mindset of what Charles is describing, perhaps you've had something where you had like a return delimited list of privileges, you know, that stood in a global, in a user record, or even in extended privileges, you know, because that's kind of the perfect place to have that stuff. Then you can just as easily, as long as you had, say, an existing custom function that were taking that in charge, then you could just fork that custom function and say, now instead of looking at extended privileges, you're now looking at HAM, you know, and like you snap your fingers and you're done.
Here's an old system where I rolled my own, and I'm not too embarrassed to say this, to show this. This is a really old system. It's probably, let me just jump to my stuff in there. And this is how this is about, I don't know, 10, 12 years old or something like that. It was FileMaker, I don't know, whatever, 10 at the time. So this is how we did it. We had all of these users, and then the users, you could, you know, this is obviously a portal. You select the user, and then you pick a role somewhere in here, and you can see it's broken. Yeah, yay, because you know what, you know what happens when that happens. All right, some role got deleted. This person got left in la la land because of bad data. So this is exactly what's happened with my personal account here. So I pick a role, I'm in accounting, and then I can define those roles. So there was another, and I thought it was so clever. I spent so much time on this and made it all. At the time, it wasn't bad looking. It's pretty small. You can tell from the screen size. But here, and you know, these have these different things, and these are all the privileges for all of these different roles. And everyone has got this combination of these different privs. So it was really hard for them to keep track of. It's like, okay, what do they have again? I need her to be able to log in. Just give her an admin thing so we don't have to figure out what the exact privilege is. And of course, when this failed, it would say on the screen what privilege that they didn't, you know, it said you don't have the find person privilege or the edit person, right? And I think a lot of people built these kinds of things, right? But the truth is, you virtually never change all of this crap, right? You pretty much don't. And if you do change it, it's because you're giving somebody some special override. Right. So what I could do is whatever that special override is, I could actually say if they get current date as less than certain day as a calculation. And now I've given them the override up until next week, and it automatically reverts back just through a simple FileMaker expression. Right. So I can't do that with this kind of thing. So eventually everybody gets left and turned into super admins in here. Right. That's, you know, this is a dev data, but that's the idea. So that's the kind of stuff how I used to handle this when I actually did FileMaker work. And I thought, you know, that was creative, but not so much anymore.
And well, at the very least, it gives you a central spot to be able to see everything at a glance so that you can look up a user and you can see what they can and can't do.
Mm-hmm. You could put a UI on, right? I've just never built a solution that we needed it, to be honest with you. right? The UI is maybe a drop down that they pick one of these 3 states, right? Or something like that. We use in Better Forms, FM Better Forms, we use each one of these is actually a subscription. So this is a plan, this is a plan, this is a plan. And what plans do you own are the collection of the groups that you belong into. So
Yeah, I mean, so much depends on the use case. When if you've got a client that has hundreds of users and they want to be able to see a matrix of who can do what.
So yeah, you can still do that because the user ultimately, they don't see this. Like at the user level, they see Eric, manager, Charles, admin, Joe Blob, broken data. All right, so there's some kind of, I'm not sure what's going on in here. So, right, that's what they really see. So you can make your same matrix. That's exactly the same as what you would normally have. The only difference is HAM allows multiple group joining. So if you don't have inheritances, you have 2 different groups. This is East Coast, this is West Coast, this is head office. And the supervisor, the East Coast supervisor can see the East Coast. The North American supervisor can have East Coast and West Coast, right? The vice president can have head office, which inherits East Coast and West Coast. So you can create that. That you can't do with normal, just a single role, right? So that's the difference. You can have multiple things. There's no opinion here. Okay, so there's virtually, I'd be very surprised if you can think of something that you can't solve this way. Anyhow, I'm going to stop my share so that I'm hogging up all this stuff. I hope that gives you some different ways of thinking about things.
I mean, it's so great. I want to thank you again, Charles. And also perhaps one thing, because you showed your solution from the FileMaker 10 days, but in the FileMaker 10 days, we didn't have JSON as part of the product, so you like taking, having it is opening up doors, and you stepped right in, and then you let everyone reap the benefits on that, and that's great. And I think one other thing perhaps that ought to be mentioned is I think one of the custom function relies on the while, so you do need to have at least FileMaker 18 if you want to run that.
We use while because it came out and it's recursive instead of a tail function, but yeah. Does anybody use JSON as a data store in anything for setting privileges, preferences, things like that?
I've started recently, but as I told you, it's incomplete and it's an experiment at this point.
Mm-hmm. You find that it's because the data is not opinionated, it's super extensible. Like we use JSON store for all kinds of stuff. I don't know if anybody uses it as a technique where you have a generic data store table and then you store various pieces of data in that table, totally unrelated to anything. And the ID, the foreign key, what you'd normally have as a foreign key is basically the owner of that data. And then it's just a data object. I'll stop that. Sometimes you look at the webcams and it's like, oh, they did move. It's like you can't tell if it's the screen or not.
Well, at least next to HAM, I learned how to use loop to replace the multiple if conditions. That's awesome.
That's a really massive thing, right, for coding?
Yeah, it made so much sense. The moment you said it, it made so much sense. It immediately clicked. I don't know why I didn't think of that earlier. But when you said it, it was so clear. Really awesome. Great job.
I'm just checking. You're talking about single pass loop or something else?
Yes. If you have concatenated if statements and then you have exits, tons of exit scripts or whatever, this loop statement resolves everything. Oh my God, I'm going to simplify my solutions greatly tonight.
Yeah, we'll go back. Here's a couple other really killer tips. And Lindsay, I don't know if Jason's still on, it's probably asleep. If Lindsay will concur, just a sec, let me pull one up here.
I'm here as well.
Hey there. All right, this is one that everybody in our team can truly appreciate. Okay, let me share my screen again, if I could. And this is whenever we write things that have real loops, not single pass or loops, but any real loop. So I'm going to pick some script in here at random. Let me see if there is one. Do you know what's one that I could use? Do you know offhand, Jason? That's something that's got a loop in it.
Like a real one, or
Yeah, a real loop, an iterative loop. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the say if you go into the edit TTP or edit FFP ones, I think.
Portal edit. No, it will be in there here, right? So hold on here.
In the survey side.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Edit TTP. I might have one.
Something maybe in here. Let's just see. Let me just find. Okay, here's one. Here is and there isn't one in here. I don't want. You know what I'm looking for here. All right, this is old script, so this probably doesn't have it, but this is something we manually do. So here's a loop, okay, an iterative loop. And I don't know how you write your loops, but I usually try to I write the exit conditions right away, because that's usually where loops go sideways. But when this is running on server, there's a real problem with that, because in fact, virtually everything we do runs on server. And because of that, you have this opacity to the solution of what's going on. And you don't know if your loop is going to exit or not. And if you've written a loop, you click a button and it's supposed to do something in a loop and then come back. And you click the button that didn't do it. So you go, oh, let me try the click, 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 click. And now you just ran a whole bunch of threads in FileMaker. They're all spinning up this loop and chewing up your CPU. So you get this uncontrolled loop. So what we do is we put a script in here. Now this is really old, so it doesn't have one, but virtually everything that we do does, and it's called perform script. And the script is called, we call it a few different things, so I'm going to guess.
And that's something that we have to work on, is standardizing our name for that script.
Yeah,
sometimes it's called the escape hatch, sometimes it's called the emergency exit. You never know.
Yeah, do you know what it's called in here?
Probably try escape hatch.
Yes, escape. No.
Okay, emergency exit.
I think it was emergency. I read it for a brief second.
There it is.
This here, okay. Now, that's all we do. Okay, that's your tip. This is an empty script. So when FileMaker runs a script, it caches that script, right? It loads the script out of wherever memory, out of the database schema, and then it starts executing functions on it, and iterates through that script and it runs it. So even if you go and fix your loop, you uncomment or you say exit 1 or something like that, and you save it, the cached one that's running does not get reflected until it's stopped and started again. Very similar to when you're debugging and you make a change to a script below the one that you're running in, you can save that and still keep the debugger running, but you can't save the one that you're running because it stops, it forces it to stop. So what's in the script, I should say? Let me follow it in here. There's nothing in here, right? In fact, we don't even need this in here. So there's nothing in this script, but because this is a level down, if you will, from the parent script, it is not cached while the parent is running. So every time it comes to the loop, it gets to that single script step, which was right here. And since there's no scripts in here, there's nothing, there's no functions that are enabled, no active script lines. FileMaker doesn't even jump into it because it's empty, right? So when you debug this, you go right over this, because there's nothing in there. Now, if this script runs awry, for some reason we forgot to do some kind of exit condition, or where is it here? Here's the exit condition here. And we forgot to have this exit condition, excuse me. Then all we do is we go into this script on the running system. We know the CPU, we look at the CPU, system's becoming really slow. It's like 95%. It's like, oh crud, I got a bad loop. Right? And all we do is we go in here and we just enable something like halt script. This one has a commit record in case there's some uncommitted records, but you don't really need it. And you hit save. Okay. Now, every loop that's running erroneously will get killed. Right. And then when you're done, you see the CPU drop, you hit save, and now you just saved the day without having to reboot your server. Right. So that's your next $1 million tip.
This is awesome.
Remember who came up with the single pass loop, but it's Don Hetty or Debbie Fuchs or something. I don't know. I think it was, well, I guess that's Googleable.
I started using it about, I don't know, about 8 years ago or so, something like that, maybe 7, 8 years, 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Don Hetty. I think it's a computer science thing.
Well, it is. There's a thing called the try-catch type architecture where you test a piece of code and then you kick yourself out of it. You throw the error, and when you throw the error, you catch the error later down in some other code. And the purpose of throwing the error kicks you out of that workflow. JavaScript resolved a lot of this nested stuff, especially with callbacks. They used to call it callback hell. They resolved it with promises. The idea of that it would let other pieces of code execute while you're waiting for this slow process to run, and that kind of thing. So it's very, very similar architecture, but it's really simple. And it allows you to do things like, I don't know if there are any in here. There's not too much in here, but you can do all kinds of exit loop conditions. Like, for example, I think I can leave this in here, right? Yes. For example, let me see if this one has it. This one doesn't have too many. No, it doesn't have has a few. We have some scripts that do a lot of error checking it's a universal script of sorts. And because of that, we added a ton of error checking. I say we, it's actually Lindsay who added all the error checking into the script, and all of that error checking.
Thanks for the shout out. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to steal that. And all the error checking basically kicks the user out of the workflow, and it returns the proper error and stuff like that too. So it's a really, really good example of that single use type thing.